Alright everybody, I'm Logan Alec. This is my stimulus update for Tuesday, June 2nd. Many of you have asked me if I believe that the recent protests and civil unrest will cause another stimulus check to happen beyond what even the Democrats have proposed in the HEROES Act. To be completely honest with you, I don't really see anything strongly supporting that sentiment at this time. Okay, I continue to believe that our best hope for another round of stimulus payments is simply what the Democrats proposed in the HEROES Act. That is, another single round of $1,200 payments to Americans with perhaps expanded eligibility for both recipients and dependents, and increasing the payment threshold for dependents from $500 to $1,200 up to a maximum of 3 dependents per recipient or recipients. I will remind you, as we said before on the channel, that Republicans have called the HEROES Act dead on arrival, but of course it is possible that they will pick out bits and pieces of the HEROES Act, including the $1,200 stimulus checks, to include in perhaps their own legislation that they draft. Now, I know what many of you are thinking out there. Oh, but Bernie said. Yes, Bernie did say recently, he brought up the $2,000 a month stimulus checks again. Okay, he brought it up, especially in light of everything that's been going on recently in this country. But I will remind you that Bernie Sanders is one of the most progressive people on Capitol Hill. And just because he's calling for something or bringing something up in the Senate doesn't mean it's going to happen. Okay? How many times has Bernie Sanders brought up single-payer Medicare for all? Probably countless times. Has it happened? No. Okay? I will remind you that along with the $2,000 a month stimulus checks, Bernie Sanders is also calling for the government to cover the wages and benefits of employees up to an annualized rate of $90,000 a year. That's right. He wants the federal government to cover the wages of workers up to $90,000 a year right now during this crisis. That would be an immense cash outlay on the part of the federal government, and I think that has just about as much chance as passing as $2,000 a month stimulus checks. That is not very high unless coronavirus gets a lot worse or the more murder hornets come in or something, just something immense happens at the national level. Okay? Now, back to the protests and civil unrest. I do think that it's possible that the protests and civil unrest will cause Congress to perhaps consider some things that they wouldn't have considered otherwise. Obvious point of speculation is additional assistance for small business owners that were directly affected or even indirectly affected by the protests and the looting that surrounded the protests. Okay? Now, what do I think this would look like? I don't know. I haven't really seen too many people talk about this. I think it could perhaps look like saying, okay, business owners who were affected recently, we're going to look at your total losses, and if insurance didn't cover you, a certain amount or maybe up to your, deductible or something, we're going to cover you. We're going to make you whole or something like that. Okay. I also think that the recent protests and civil unrest could cause some members of Congress to take more seriously Pelosi's call for additional funding for state and local governments. You'll remember in the HEROES Act, the Democrats' trophy piece was state and local government funding. HEROES Act, $3 trillion bill. Almost a third of that, almost $1 trillion that was called for in the HEROES Act was an allocation to state and local and tribal governments for more funding from the federal government. Okay? In light of these recent protests, I think it's possible that some members of Congress on the right will be more open to that sentiment, okay? Because we didn't even think that Mitch would go for half of that, right? Half of what the Democrats called for in the HEROES Act in terms of state and local funding. They might be open to more now, right? In light of what's going on in many major cities and minor cities in the country today and throughout the last week, okay? What would that mean for you? Well, as I've said many times, right? Additional funding for state and local governments could perhaps mean a stimulus check at the state or local level for you. Yesterday, in Montgomery County, Texas, Precinct Commissioner James Nowak got support from the Montgomery County Commissioner's Court to approve $500 stimulus checks for residents of Montgomery County. Okay? This would be a $500 check to each homestead property owner throughout the county. Now, I think this is a bit problematic, right? Because they're only rewarding property owners, okay? That's problematic to me, all right? Because arguably the people who need money the most right now are not the people who have the means to buy their own property, right? i.e. renters, okay? Point is though, here's a county that is doing something to help at least some of its residents, all right? And we could see more of that if there's a lot of funding for state and local governments in the next relief bill. Now, what's kind of the, what's the X factor here? The X factor here is Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not on good terms with the governors and the states right now. As you probably know, he was on a call yesterday with state governors about the protests. He basically called them weak. He said they're not doing enough to quell demonstrations. He said that the governors have become a laughingstock all over the world. And he said they're making themselves look like fools. Okay? Trump is not on very good terms with the state governors right now, because obviously he wants to kind of, put the spotlight on them and their failures, right, for what's going on. And I think that could perhaps affect the odds of something like additional funding for state and local government to go through. I do. I mean, I think that, politicians, they're people and they have egos, and we'll just have to wait and see. All right. But back to the original question, I do not see at this time the protests and civil unrest lending itself to, seriously lending itself to stimulus beyond what the Democrats proposed in the HEROES Act, though I do think it could perhaps lead to additional legislation at the small business and state and local level. All right. I hope this was helpful to you. I hope everybody out there stays safe today, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.